Hello everyone, welcome to the brand new series of Springboot tutorial. In this tutorial, we will see some introductions with respect to Springboot. Springboot comes into the picture in during late 2010 plus, but before that, we have been using EJB and POJOs. So we want to know like what is happening in the Springboot framework, but it is very useful to know like what was happening before Springboot came into the picture, and hence we will see some of the history and the evolution of Springboot framework is. During 2000s and before that, if you want to develop an enterprise applications, at that point of a time, the most famous one is EJBs. So EJB was most useful in order to establish a connections to the databases and a lot of other related stuff where you can have your objects storing some values, and this can be manipulated into your database as well as services. But one of the biggest drawbacks of this particular EJB is about the configurations. So whenever a new developer comes into the project, or whenever a specific person has to take care of like what is present in EJBs in a project, at that point of a time, setting up a workspace is a bit difficult task for any persons those who are working on the project. And as a developer, we want them to concentrate on the conventions, which is nothing but coding rather than configuration of it. And hence, to avoid these stuff, POJO came into the place. POJO is nothing but a plain old Java objects in which there will be the getters and setters, and the values can be stored over there, and this is being used as a model objects, and it can be accessed from any data layer, business layer, as well as in view layers. But over here also, there were a biggest drawback is nothing but maintaining the configurations that came into the picture. After this POJOs and EJBs times, it was Spring where it got a lot of fame. Everyone in the enterprise applications would be asking you one question: if you know Spring, then you can sustain in the software world. Right. Spring came into the picture in the late 2010s. At that point of a time, maintaining the configuration was being reduced from the days it was in POJOs and in EJBs. So one of the biggest advantage of the Spring framework is it is very easy to have correlations or integrations with the Hibernate framework as well as with the Struts framework. So it was initially started that Spring had some data source XMLs and Spring configuration XMLs where you would be mentioning the different ways in which you can create a bean and how a bean is being used. But later Springboot came into the picture where it was avoiding all the drawbacks that were present in the three items that we have discussed right now. So when we are talking about Springboot is nothing but is built on Spring framework. So Springboot is not a separate framework. But one thing what Springboot does is that it just gives you a production ready applications. So whenever a new developer comes into a project, in order to set up the workspace and everything, that it would take at least 3 to 5 days in the olden days. But right now when Springboot came into the picture, you can have your applications up and running within a matter of few minutes in a new machine. And that is because of Springboot. At any point of a time, Springboot gives you a production ready applications. You can just grab the code and build your projects, and you can have your Springboot applications up and running. So that is the one of the main reason like why Spring Boot is being so much fame in the enterprise level in the enterprise level market. And one of the main advantages of the Spring Boot is you don't have to worry about the configurations. Spring Boot would generate an applications and every configuration is been set up by default and Spring Boot would take care of it. You just have to worry about coding, like you're coding your business logic. That is the only thing that you have to take care of. Other things Spring Boot would make you readily available so that you can work on it and you can see your application up and running in your local as well. And this is one of the main advantages which also eventually give a cloud computing as well, where your applications where your application would be running in a server in the production, but in order to avoid it, a lot of cloud computing comes into the picture like PCF, Amazon Web Services, where you can deploy all your microservices over there, and any point of a time, anywhere, if you just have an internet connection, you can access those services. It is very interesting, isn't it? Yes, it is. It is all because of the Spring Boot framework, and that's why it is so much fame. And everywhere you go right now, like if you are in the enterprise level Java based applications, at that point of a time they would ask you around 70% of the requirement would be based on the Spring Boot. So it is very important topic, and that's why I've also thought about taking a series of tutorial on the Spring Boot so that everyone is aware of it. And another advantage of the Spring Boot framework is, say for example, like you have some properties that is default set in the Spring Boot and you want to override it. Spring Boot provides you that particular features, like where you can override the applications itself, whatever the default was there. And that can be done by the application.properties, which is nothing but an entry point of the Spring Boot. So this is one of the advantages. And this major advantage, one more thing is, like as I said, it is a production ready application. You don't need any server when you're using Spring Boot framework. Yes, all the servers, like for making your application up and running in your local, there is some server is needed, right? If an EJB or such a kind of an application that we are running on our local, we either need a WebSphere or some other Tomcat server or any other application server you need it, right? So when using Spring Boot framework, it has an embedded server that is present in a jar file, and you don't have to parse it or something like that. Since it is being present inside the jar file, it is cross-platform and can be accessed anywhere. So that is one of the major advantages also present in the Spring Boot. And this eventually led to a lot of advantages, and thereby Java microservices can be developed with the help of Spring Boot, and which is the major advantages and well known in the market right now. So that's all about the Spring Boot tutorial, and over here I just want to give a brief introduction about it. In the next tutorial we will see some hands-on on it, and some other topics I'll come across. I'll explain you that. Thank you and have a nice day.